Video games, by their base nature, allow you to do things that are really impossible in reality. Jumping to superhuman heights, running on walls, flight, or what have you. It's all part and parcel of the gaming experience. Like a lucid dream, anything is within your capacity given the right game and the right context. That being said, how about a game that gives you the power to use any tool you desire in order to get to an end goal? It exists, and it's had a couple sequels since, but I haven't seen anyone talk about it in a long time. So join me for a closer look at Scribblenauts Unlimited. Greetings everyone, this is the Hipster Snek, and today we'll be looking at the fourth installment of the Scribblenauts series, Scribblenauts Unlimited. The series features the, rooster-headed boy, Maxwell, and his magic journal, which can manifest any objects he writes into the book, provided it's not an abstract concept. Then he's sent into a field with a series of puzzles that he must summon items to help clear. Unlimited in particular originally launched on the 3DS, Wii U, and PC platforms in 2013. Updated ports are also available now on the Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4 as of late 2018. The story, given that there actually is one this time, begins with a competitive, adventurous couple who explored the world for treasures untold up until they decided to tie the knot and settle down, and subsequently had 42 children. Thus, Maxwell and Lily were given rare artifacts, Maxwell's notebook and Lily's globe. And to temper them from becoming spoiled by these great gifts, they were sent out to put their talents to good use. However, upon angering a passing wizard with their mischief, Lily had a curse put upon her that would gradually turn her into stone. Thus, Maxwell has to gather up star rights, star-shaped items that are formed from people's happiness, in order to save his sister using his notebook to solve puzzles and his sister's globe in order to travel rapidly all over the world. And thus, the game begins. The art style is very distinctive, almost patchwork in its presentation. You'll notice that nothing is particularly high resolution, and most animations are kept very simple, both because of the sheer number of objects found in the game, but also to stop the animators from losing their minds, I have to assume. However, I find this actually enhances the game's overall appeal by maintaining the aesthetic consistently. The focus is on the individual items representing real-world counterparts, and sometimes a game of Stump the Dictionary can be shockingly hard to win given the sheer variety intrinsic to the game. This means that not only do the items look like representations of the real-world thing, but that they behave as such. More on that when we get to gameplay though. But the world has such a pieced-together look to it, and in such a way where it seems like each crowded sub-area is kind of like its own little diorama, artistically constructed to reflect the themes and motifs of what one would expect to find in each, some imagination and artistic license taken into account. The sheer number of items the game has to account for in its dictionary is genuinely impressive, and the art team should be commended for tackling such a monumental approach. Which is funny considering this is the same team that also did the Drawn to Life games, whose fundamental art design philosophy was almost exactly the opposite. Maybe I'll cover those games in the future, who knows. The sound design of the game relies heavily on less is more. The music is nice, relaxed set of themes, never really getting too out of control. This, of course, is in part due to the game's puzzle game-like structure. You're always allotted enough time to get everything done, with only a small number of challenges in the game's runtime involving any sort of twitch reflex skill, and the sound design reflects that mentality perfectly. I think the word I'd use is calming, overall, adding again to the game's presentation. The sound effects are pleasant as well, with only a small library of such sounds being utilized across many different items. The iconic poof sound of items being destroyed, or the pop when new items are placed or change nature, are probably the ones that you'll hear the most often, alongside of gasps, groans, and human-like sounds that never really reach audio clips in their own right. I guess that's sort of funny in a way, being the inverse theory from the very busy and labor-intensive art team's obligations. Gameplay-wise, Scribblenauts Unlimited is, at its core, a puzzle game that utilizes simple threads of logic. Maxwell's ability to summon any object he wants allows vast flexibility to how each of the puzzles is handled. For instance, an early task has you getting a cat down from a tree. I decide to handle it by summoning a helicopter, flying up and collecting the feline gently from the dangerous resting place and safely touching down. And with some experimentation, I found you could also handle it in much less subtle ways, like using an axe to bring the whole thing down. The cat isn't even really fazed by this. Or other tools like a chainsaw have very similar outcomes. Of course, you can also have the ability to modify objects as well, courtesy of the game's robust collection of adjectives also at your disposal. For example, you can create fast wings, which you can then attach to Maxwell, allowing him flight and very high movement speeds. Or, in order to make a run-down vehicle work once again, you can append the adjective new or fixed to it in order to get it running. Taking this into consideration, you can approach the game's many numerous, oft comedic challenges with the over-the-top approaches all your own. For example, when prompted to assist a pig win a race, I granted him use of a jetpack, which handily won the day. Yeah, needless to say, the game doesn't feel the need to stay rooted in the logic and potentially plausible for too long. For instance, one fairly early challenge, you and some NPCs are holed up in a fire station trying to ride out a zombie apocalypse scenario, and you're tasked with protecting the denizens within. The battle culminates with you riding around in the Ed 1000 from RoboCop, which I was able to fortify by way of adding invincible to its description, allowing it to easily withstand dozens of Zomzoms fruitlessly attempting to dismantle it. And before I get too far ahead of myself, the game has a world map, which expands the more star rights you have on hand. And each section of the map is a thematically appropriate set of puzzles, each led by an NPC of some sort. Some of the quick and easy ones give you fragments of a star right, and when you get 10 of them, you extract a star right from them. And ones that are more demanding will warp you into a subfield where you can execute the puzzles in a vacuum so you aren't distracted. In these fields, you'll also be given a string of hints for each, in the event that you get stuck, which more often than not will come from overthinking the puzzle rather than underthinking it. For example, in a haunted house-themed level, I was prompted to give Maxwell something to see ghosts with. I was left completely stumped, trying on types of eyewear of all different variety in hopes that one would eventually work, up until the first hint mentioned psychic powers, whereupon the crystal ball I summoned next to the trick just fine. Most of the puzzles are fairly simple and straightforward, and few will make you scratch your head. Though admittedly, I did run into some that require some level of cultural context, like a stork forgetting what he was bound to deliver. I'm sure handing a random bird a baby makes perfect sense in the cultures that use that story, but I do have to wonder how that was handled internationally. That aside, the game maintains a very lighthearted approach to puzzle solving and resolution. The violence is very cartoony and slapsticky, with zero evidence of any actual gore, even when you do some over-the-top things like taking a flaming chainsaw to a Shoggoth just to illustrate a point. And you can, of course, re-challenge the maps at any time and attempt different solutions to each problem using different methods. Though this does sort of underscore a bit of a soft spot in the overall game design, some solutions just work way too well. If you need to move an object from one spot to another, rope and glue works in almost every case. If you need to defeat something, generating a strong or mighty weapon, and/or invincible mech suit as mentioned before. And perhaps the biggest game breaker for any puzzle that involves a door blocking you from just walking to the star right is the adjective cannibal. This has been a bit of a well-known exploit since Super Scribblenauts on the DS, but if you have a solution where, say, the star right is held behind a green metal door, you can just make a cannibal green metal door and set it nearby and soon find that your door problems are a thing of the past regardless of the intended solution. Now, mind you, this works a lot less than it does in past games, as you'll now need to rely more on solving riddles and prompts than lever mechanisms, which made this exploit so potent in the first place, but it will come up now and then. But honestly, that's probably my biggest complaint, and it's sort of an extension of my own inability to be more flexible in my thinking, so maybe the problem is mine and not the game's. So barring my own ineptitude and maybe the game's short length, I struggle to find fault in this installment. Unlike its follow-up, the DC Comics theme Unmasked, where I felt compelled to use characters in the license in question for almost every prompt, and really, what problem isn't solved by throwing 10 copies of Superman, 5 versions of The Flash, and the entire Green Lantern Corps at it? Unlimited really does feel like my options are limitless. It's a game whose simple presentation hides a terrifyingly complex plethora of options below, and the unlimited ways you can address the puzzles and challenges within it. See what I did there? It's still a great game, and I strongly recommend that you try it if you haven't before. And that's the final word on this obscure review. And this has been the Scribble Snek, bringing another underloved game to light. If you enjoyed today's episode, tap the like button so I know. And for more content like this, make sure to tap the subscribe and bell icons too. It all helps me out a lot and keeps the channel growing. Leave a comment down below with some of your amusing anecdotes about the Scribblenauts series. Did you play these games for yourselves before I talked about them? I'd be curious to know. And for more from me each week, we're now rehoming the Tomodachi Bros podcast mirror right here to channel Snek on Wednesdays now, so look forward to those as well. But for now, I'm signing off. Join me here each Monday from our obscure reviews, indie excellence, Snek tech, and more. And I will see you there.